Monday Night Chat with Wong Chen.
Brought to you by the Member of Parliament for Kelana Jaya in collaboration with Invo.
Hi, welcome to Policy Monday. This Policy Monday is a two-parter. That means it's going to take 2 weeks to complete. The first week, we're going to talk about the history of Malaysian economics. And then the second part, we're going to talk about the future for Malaysia. Now, one of the things I always emphasize to my interns in my P104 office internship program is that in order for us to move forward and chart a new future, we need to always examine the past so that we look at patterns or economic growth or what were they doing in the last 40, 50, 60 years. Right, let's start from 1957, after we got independence. Throughout the period from 57 up to the 60s, we were mostly still a backwater colonial economic system. Basically, we produced rubber, tin, and these were all controlled by the British companies back in London. Yeah? When we turn around the 1970s after the race riot of 69, there was a first real thinking about what we should do about the future. And that is how we got the new economic policy, the NEP. Yeah? It addresses core issue about, how about distribution, redistribution, positive discrimination, so on and so forth. But broadly speaking, the 1970s was still an agrarian-based economy. We had farming, fishing for the domestic consumption, and mining and timber being the mainstay of the income for the country. Yeah? But the great thing is at the end of the 70s, we basically discovered oil. Yeah? And that's when Petronas was formed. I think it was formed in 78 or 79. Now, fast forward to 1980s, Dr. Mahathir comes to power. Now, you must understand the economic growth during Mahathir's rule of 22 years, from the 80s until the late 90s and the early 2001 or 2002 when he stepped down. Those 20-odd years was basically driven by oil money. Yeah? That's the foundation of the Malaysian economic growth. But it also had a philosophical change. In truth, it was a developmental state model, what we call in economic terms, developmental state model, where government plans a lot and we follow through. Yeah. Now the hallmark of the Mahathir administration was in the early 1980s. We started opening up our economy to FDIs, foreign direct investment. That was covered last week. Foreign direct investment brought in a lot of jobs, and in order to support this kind of investments, we built infrastructure. So the government went on an infrastructure span, and because in the early days money was a bit tight, even though the money from oil was coming in, but coming a bit slower, we decided to privatize. Yeah? Mahathir was obviously inspired by Margaret Thatcher and also Ronald Reagan, despite, outwardly he was against them. He embraced the neoliberal concept of privatization. And that's where we got in the early 1990s, the big boom, fueled by debt mostly. And it was private sector debt that won contracts from government. So what we had was a developmental planning. And then Mahathir looked east in the early 80s and said, we're going to use the Japanese model of industrialization, and then engage Thatcher and Reagan in the neoliberal economics, allow privatization of this. So it's a mixture of things. There's no real ideological left wing or right wing. He just picked and chose the things that he wanted, and he drove the economy upwards. Now everything comes to a crash in 1997 when the great Asian financial crisis took place. Now this is the thing that he did. He stopped basically capital outflow. And the moment he did that, he basically took a major departure from the idea of neoliberal economics and moved to an area where we're not certain what it is. What we know is that in the late 1990s, there was a lot of disgruntlement, unhappiness that the system that he was building was a crony capitalist system. And the first act of capital controls was basically to protect the big tycoons in town. Yeah? Now this crony capitalist system survived. What we've seen is since he handed over power and during Badawi's tenure is that these tycoons, famous one, Halim Saad, all these big shots, basically disappeared from corporate Malaysia, and in their place was the rise of GLCs and GLICs, government-linked companies and government-linked investment companies. Yeah? So by the Badawi administration time, it was the retreat of the private sector tycoons, or so-called crony capitalists, and the rise of government-owned companies, banks, development companies, IPPs and all those, government had stakes in it all across the board. Yeah. Now, when Najib became Prime Minister, he then attempted to move Malaysia back to a more neoliberal platform. Basically, he said the government has grown too big, that the government needs to divest its interests in the economy, and that we have to go back to a more liberal open market. And yet, interestingly enough, he produced the new economic model in 2010. Many of us that looked at it early on said that it's not too bad. For my personally, I think it's a bit too neoliberal, too capitalist. But I think he had some good elements in there, which is, the private sector and the public sector should not compete. Okay, so we believe that he was more or less doing the right thing. Then, what we know later is, of course, in 2009, he formed 1MDB, and the 1MDB scandal just picked up. So, here it is in 2010, he's telling the world we're going to liberalize a bit more, and some of these things are justifiable. And then we start to know the scandals coming in, and by 2015, the game is over. The joke has really started. I mean, the joke is, of course, the 1MDB. He was not pursuing real liberal economics. He was actually pursuing a kleptocratic system. So the 1MDB scandal destroyed his entire platform. He got some initial feedback from the public and from the investors at large, and they were quite interested. Oh, Malaysia is going to liberalize, so we're going to come back and invest. That all has just dissipated when the whole 1MDB scandal exploded in 2015. So next week, if you can see the trajectory, 1960s still colonial economic system, 1970s still agrarian mining, 1980s the great liberalization, the great idea of developmental state economic planning, yeah, up to the 1990s crony capitalism, the retreat of crony capitals, coming in, GLC, the rise of GLCs under Badawi, all the way up to Najib, and then Najib's attempt to liberalize again, but then scuttled by his own 1MDB scandal, making us a kleptocratic economy instead. Next week, we're going to talk about if we rule and we win this GE14, what can we learn from the past and which direction we're going in the future. That's it for this week. Hi, Q&A in 120 seconds. This week, as usual, the interns have prepared me 5 questions. We're going to start now. First question, candidates for GE14. When will we know? I've heard rumors that the candidates will be named somewhere at the end of February. Yeah, we're having some problem in the Selangor government regarding the Adun seats. Let's hope that they're sorted out as soon as possible. Number 2, the allegation of purchase of Audi Q7, I suppose that's a 4-wheel drive, to be used by the Menteri Besar via the SEDC of Perak. Well, it's very easy to find out this because SEDC is a government body. Since it's a Perak government body, the members, the Adun, should press very hard to ensure full disclosure by the Perak government. Trying to silence Nge and Nga is not a good idea. Okay. Number 3, Dr. M commented that women representative in Barisan Nasional is very low. Well, the numbers in Parliament itself is quite low. Women participation is about 11% only. Now, if we win in Pakatan Harapan, are we going to impose a quota system? I don't think we're going to look at a quota system. I think we're going to still try our best to see who gets elected, and that the cabinet members should be based largely on merits. But we do have a target of 30%. Whether we can meet the target or not is dependent on the election results. Number 4, Indira Gandhi's case. What are my views? I think this is good news for Indira Gandhi, of course. And it's good that the government government claims that they had a hand in the judgment of this thing, right? Azalina said that, BN responsible for it. Well, I don't care who's responsible for it. I think it's good that we got a final solution to the issue on, unilateral or one-person conversion. The most important thing now is to ensure that the police carry out what has been ordered by the courts. Number 5, lastly, my Chinese New Year preparation. This year, I don't know what it is, but the mood around town is quite slow. The only thing I've done is I went to purchase 2 new lanterns and then I put it out in the house. Haven't done the ang pao yet. We're just preparing to do a bit more for Chinese New Year next week. Okay, that's it for Q&A this week.